Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in.
Okay, happy Tuesday everybody. We have a lot of bad news to cover in today's video. This is not intentional, this is not cherry-picked in order to push a particular narrative. China is, once again, these last few months going through a very difficult economic and financial period. Because we are doing daily coverage of this, the developments that we need to cover reflects this reality.
Mount Everest. Question. Before Mount Everest was discovered, what was the tallest mountain in the world? The answer? Mount Everest. Just because people didn't know that it was the tallest mountain doesn't change facts. Objective reality exists independently of human perception. Even if human beings don't perceive Mount Everest as the tallest mountain, maybe they didn't know that mountain existed, doesn't mean it wasn't there. Human perception, what people know about or think or believe, doesn't determine reality. Reality determines reality. The corollary is that censorship, lies, propaganda, and misinformation are futile. If I tell a believer in the Greek gods that Mount Olympus is not the tallest mountain, but rather Mount Everest is, I don't owe any apology. I didn't make it that way. I am just reporting a fact that was true even before I knew about it. I am just a messenger. If I lie and say Mount Olympus is taller, nothing changes. Likewise, if the Chinese economy sucks, nothing is helped if I lie about it. Misinformation and lies aren't just unethical, they are futile. Because the truth is, whether you like it or not. So don't apologize for it, right? I don't understand why anybody wants to apologize, for reporting honestly on the Chinese economy. Don't apologize for the truth. If you tell the truth and people don't want to hear it, that's their fucking problem. If you lie and don't tell the truth, then it doesn't change facts. So lying or not volunteering information, which is a lie of omission, doesn't help either. Okay? So why apologize? Doesn't make sense.
We should also remind ourselves that just because we are seeing very poor and sometimes quite concerning economic developments every day does not necessarily mean that we are suggesting that the entire system is about to collapse. If we were following, for example, the United States economy during the height of the financial crisis, it may have appeared that the sky was falling and everything was about to crash. Of course, the system got through. This is not to say that China will or will not collapse or will not get through. All I am saying is that as we follow things day by day, we need to remind ourselves that most economic and financial downturns are long-term processes, and sometimes we have to step back and see the forest from the trees. In saying that, we cannot shy away from the fact that China's economy very much is in a lot of difficulty at the moment.
Disingenuous. Disingenuous. Adjective. Definition. Of a person or their behavior, slightly dishonest or not speaking the complete truth. Example, it was disingenuous of her to claim she had no financial interest in the case. Antonym, ingenuous. Source, Cambridge Dictionary. The Chinese economy is based largely on what Japan was doing in the post-war period, 1945 to 1992, and has all the same flaws as this model. Japan was an investment-driven economy. The state instituted protectionist measures that drove down the cost of capital, making it easier to invest. However, the other side of the sword was that it reduced the purchasing power of the Japanese household. This forced up savings and reduced spending. Domestic consumption was retarded. Thus, it was easy for the capitalists to open factories and hire workers, and manufacturing flourished. However, the domestic worker didn't purchase the fruits of his manufacturing. At first, this didn't matter, because as an export-led economy, Japan just dumped most of what it had made on lucrative Western markets. This more than compensated for the retardation of domestic consumption. The country grew very wealthy. However, its own success was its own failure. Eventually, the advantage of cheap labor ran out as the country grew wealthier, and the cost of labor increased as a result, and as Japanese birth rates began falling, especially in the 70s. Beginning in the 70s, but it really picked up later. A housing market bubble popped in 1992, and Japan has since never regained its former status as an economic superpower, which it had during the Cold War, especially in the 80s. The Chinese economy occurs in the context of a rigid political system, modeled on that of the USSR. This system is top-heavy. Leaders make decisions and pass them down, with little regard for details and no incentive to take initiative. This encourages laxity, ambiguity, and lagresse. Was good at deploying capital, tax and spend, but was not good at collating on-the-ground data to know what to spend money on. Thus, sometimes the USSR would indeed greatly increase people's lives through 3-year or 5-year plans. However, usually it bungled what it was doing and wasted money on extravagant pork barrel spending. Rigid. The system created an edifice that didn't change much. This was intentional, done in the name of stability. However, it wasn't good at adapting to changes. This rigidity also unintentionally encouraged corruption, backbiting, and factionalism. Although the system was designed with checks and balances on paper, and believe it or not, Vladimir Lenin actually copied some ideas from the British and American constitutions. The Supreme Soviet, similar to the US Congress and British Parliament, for example, but it's a different conversation. In practice, the red tape and increased strength of the state counterintuitively weakened checks and balances. Corruption, opacity, and intrigue flourished. Human rights were not respected. They were seen as a foreign concept that was both abstract and subversive of order and authority. Okay, so that was the USSR and that was Japan. Both of these systems collapsed in different ways. Since China occupies the middle of the Venn diagram between Japanese economics and Soviet politics, and since both of those systems proved unsustainable and collapsed, it's probable that China will collapse someday too, probably for the same reasons. Many of the challenges China is facing today resemble those of the USSR and Japan faced immediately prior to their destruction. Protective lacunae. Tony needs to protect himself from censors. He just points to hard data. However, some analysis and editorializing is not necessarily uncalled for. An honest analyst would conclude that China might collapse someday. Let's hope that it does. I hope China collapses. They are not human beings.
And we begin today with the big news. Zhongzhi Enterprise Group Co., a financial conglomerate with 1 trillion yuan under management, has missed payments on multiple high-yield investment products, triggering market and regulator anxiety about the health of China's banking industry. 2 clients of Zhongrong International Trust Co. Limited announced that the Chinese financial institution has failed to repay maturing trust products they had purchased. The announcements come after rumors surfaced online on the same day that Zhongrong had suspended repaying some products as a result of a liquidity crisis at Zhongzhi, its second largest shareholder. We have seen many property developers default on payments, but coming from a major financial player like this is another story. In the mainland, it is among the biggest players in the country's $3 trillion trust industry, a mega conglomerate which combines commercial and investment banking, private equity, and wealth management. It has been in the spotlight in recent years too, due to its aggressive expansion and significant risk exposures. However, very much like the example of Evergrande within the property sector, Zhongzhi is not a standalone risky actor, but rather a product of wider systemic behavior. China's shadow banking excesses forced regulators to crack down on the sector back in 2017. Since then, many Chinese trusts have been under pressure that was made much worse with the property crisis, as some trusts were heavily exposed to real estate assets. And of course, this Zhongzhi incident comes as the market is already deeply shaken by this very ongoing housing crisis. The last thing investors and regulators want is a dual property financial crisis, though regular viewers know all too well that this is a real possibility. Quote, Zhongzhi shows how the real estate's liquidity problem can create a domino effect on other sectors, including the trust industry. It would not be surprising to see more trusts with a high asset allocation towards real estate face payment issues. End quote. Others are concerned too. Quote, the biggest problem now is how to isolate the risks associated with Zhongzhi Group so that it doesn't cause confidence of the entire trust industry to collapse. If the situation continues to worsen, expect the scale of the risks to be no less than when a leading property developer defaults. End quote. In a sign that regulators are concerned too, Beijing has set up a task force to deal with Zhongzhi. Chinese financial media outlet Caixin writes today that Zhongzhi's liquidity problem may, quote, trigger a domino effect, putting more related companies in trouble, a senior industry insider told us. In addition to Zhongrong, there have been online rumors that 3 other trust companies have defaulted on their trust products. End quote. All 3 have denied the rumors. During trading on Monday, yesterday, the markets were very much spooked. The CSI 300 index fell for the 5th time in 6 sessions. The Hang Seng China Enterprises Index of shares in Hong Kong lost 1.6%. China's 10-year yield fell 1 basis point to 2.62%, approaching this year's low of 2.59%. And the yuan depreciated towards its weakest level this year. And that leads us to the next development. As I just said, China's currency, the yuan, fell towards its weakest level this year. As we can see, the offshore yuan dropped as much as 0.3% on Monday to 7.2816 per dollar, less than 0.1% from its 2023 low set back in June. The yuan is now down 5% this year to date against the US dollar. Quote, the People's Bank of China is fighting back the rising USD tide with another stronger than expected yuan fixing today. This underscores the authorities' preference for RMB stability as well as to curb excessive RMB speculation. End quote. This comment was made yesterday on Monday, adding that the currency will likely receive support at 7.3 per dollar. Others warn, however, that further deterioration could very much be on the cards. Quote, if more sectors, for example highly indebted local governments, succumb to deleveraging, there could be a bigger and longer toll on mainland China's economy. In such slowdowns, currency depreciation tends to be both a consequence and part of the solution. End quote. And next up, today, Tuesday, we got yet more poor economic data showing that this could well be the case. As we have seen, trading on Monday already showed a market deeply concerned with China's economic outlook. Today, Tuesday, the National Bureau of Statistics reported official July data that broadly missed expectations, further adding to this anxiety. Let's quickly move through the salient official numbers. While some do not believe official numbers from Beijing to be accurate, at the very least it gives us an idea of the trends, and the current trends, as we will see, are not positive. Retail sales, a proxy for consumption, rose by 2.5% in July year-on-year, below expectations for a 4.5% increase, according to a Reuters poll. Industrial production rose by 3.7%, below an expected 4.4%. Fixed asset investment rose by 3.4% for the first 7 months of this year, from a year ago, below an expected 3.8%. On a year-to-date basis, real estate investment fell by 8.5% in July, a greater decline than we saw in June. The urban unemployment rate increased to 5.3% in July from 5.2% in June. Perhaps what is most concerning in the report, however, is not what was included, but what was excluded from the numbers. For the first time in years, the National Bureau of Statistics did not break down unemployment by age, meaning we could not see what the youth unemployment rate was in July. Of course, regular viewers know that the 16 through 24-year-old unemployment category reached a record high of 21.3% in June, and that youth unemployment has become a sensitive economic and political challenge for Beijing. The National Bureau of Statistics' decision not to include the breakdown is thus very telling. A National Bureau of Statistics spokesperson explained that the numbers were disappointing due to a, quote, intricate and complicated situation overseas and domestically, and insufficient domestic demand, end quote. Of course, these poor numbers come hot on the heels of bank loans sliding to a 14-year low, consumer and producer prices declining, and exports dropping the most since February 2020, when the entire country was put on lockdown. Quote, Tuesday's data shows how difficult it is for China's economy to sail against the wind, with challenges from almost all dimensions and efficient policy support from few fronts. End quote. Meanwhile, also today, Tuesday, the People's Bank of China unexpectedly lowered the rate on its one-year loans by 15 basis points to 2.5%. The second reduction since June. This was a surprise move. Only one of 15 analysts surveyed by Bloomberg in a recent poll had predicted the move, which came after the publication of today's poor July data. Of course, it also signals that policymakers are indeed deeply concerned about the deteriorating outlook on the Chinese economy, especially in the real estate market, with employment and now renewed concerns for the financial sector. Quote, the People's Bank of China's rate cut was earlier and bigger than we expected, signaling the central bank recognizes the urgency to support the economy. The outlook has deteriorated, with the property slump triggering financial stress. End quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a wonderful Tuesday, and I will see you all tomorrow.